Be bold. Be heard. Welcome to Unmute Your Mic with your host, Jessica Bell. The views, information, or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Unmute Your Mic.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Unmute Your Mic. My name is Jessica Bell. I am your host from Kansas City, Missouri, as always. And today I have Keana with me. She is from Alabama, and I'm super excited for you all to just hear her story, to get to know her as I'm getting to know her. So, Keana, if you could just introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about you.
Okay, well, my name is Keana. I usually call myself Keana W. Mitchell just because my maiden name used to be Williams. And so when I finally changed my name to when I finally changed it to my last name from a married name Mitchell after maybe 10 years. Anyway, that's a long story. I finally changed it and I decided I wanted to keep something that reminded me of, who I was before I was married. So I just threw the Williams in there. And so I usually just go by Keana W. Mitchell, but most people just call me Keana because that is a mouthful. I am I'm a mom. I have 3 daughters, 2 stepkids. They range from like 22 to 11. I'm married. I've been married for almost 16 years, and I've known my husband for 17 years. Well, almost 17 years. I have worked for the state of Alabama for like 8 years as a rehabilitation counselor. I have a master's degree. I'm a life coach. I sing. I write. Do a little bit of everything. I podcast. I do a little bit of everything, but my main focus is on relationships because I feel that relationships are very important. Whether you are talking about like relationship with friends, your relationship with yourself, your relationship with your spouse or your partner, whatever it is, relationships are important. And I think it's important for us to understand relationships because relationships I think, also help you understand our relationship to God. But if we don't have the whole relationship factor down, it's hard to communicate with anyone. It's hard to know ourselves, hard to know your spouse, your kids. It is hard to even have a relationship with God if you don't understand relationships. So that's pretty much what I do. I deal with relationships. I write about relationships. I read books on relationships. I watch TV shows about relationships. I'm just all about relationships and what can be done to make them better.
I love that. I love that. And I feel like enough people don't talk about the importance of relationships. And so
Exactly.
with you kind of honing in on that as far as like with your podcast and that kind of thing, what do you think are some of the biggest things that people need to know about the importance of relationships?
I think people need to understand that relationships don't have to be perfect because that's the thing that people think. They think that, oh, my relationship is not perfect and we must be in trouble or things must be wrong, but that's not always the case. Some of the strongest relationships have arguments, they have fights, they have issues that have not and can't be resolved. It's okay to agree to disagree. I know people think that you should work everything out, but sometimes you just can't. So if you understand that and don't try to constantly like start fires and work on this issue that may not ever be resolvable, then you would have a better understanding that, oh, okay, well, let's work on something we do agree on. Let's eliminate that. Let's not talk about that. Let's work on this or come to an understanding about that issue where you don't have to agree. It's okay. I just think that people feel that it has to be perfect, and relationships are not perfect. It's work. Like you have to continually work on relationships. You never get to a point where, oh, I got it. You don't have it. It's like just constant work on your relationship and yourself. So it doesn't have to be perfect.
And that's so good because I do feel like that is a huge misconception of like
Exactly.
just to have if something's wrong or we argue or we this or we that, and it's like at the end of the day we are taking two people from two completely different walks of
My
life,
point exactly. Yes.
and you're trying to bring them together and trying to create this life together. And so there's really no easy way that can happen.
Mm-mm.
And so I wanted to ask you, being married as long as you've been married, what were some of the lessons that you had to learn early on in
Oh
your
wow. show is not long enough to tell you about all the lessons I had to learn early on,
Well,
but
a
there
couple
were a
of key
lot of
nuggets.
lessons. I can give you some of them. The first lesson that I learned is that your husband, once you get to know your spouse, they may not be the person that you saw when you were dating. But it's not a bad thing because you always put your best foot forward. I'm pretty sure that once my husband married me, I wasn't the person he saw when he was dating either. Because it's like, we weren't living together. We would see each other like after work. Then I go home, and we had stepkids to throw into that. So I mean, there was a lot of things that I had to learn. I had to learn that okay, Keana, first of all, you can be a mother figure, but you may not be able to exactly be their parent because of the fact that they're after a certain age, like 7 or 8. They already know who their parents are, they have their whole system together, but you can still be an influence and you can still be a role model. You just have to know, kind of like know your place, know where you come in, and know what to do to help out and be a support instead of coming and trying to take over. And I figured that out later on, but if I had known that at the beginning, it kind of would have been helpful, but I did learn that eventually. I also learned that if you got into an argument, it doesn't have to last forever because things happen. We're not perfect. And that's another thing I learned, and I finally realized that my husband's not perfect. I am not perfect. We're going to have some hiccups. Just get over it, move forward. And for the longest, I did not understand that, didn't realize that because in my mind, I had this fairy tale. I'm like a romantic kind of person. So it's like you get married, it's happily ever after, life is good, you don't argue, it's always romantic, it's always this. But that is not the case. And then I also learned that just because I keep telling my husband what my love language is, he may or may not be able to do that. But it doesn't mean that he loves you any less. It's just that sometimes people are not able to do certain things. I've learned a lot. And I think that if I had known these things like June 26, 2005, it would have saved me like years of struggling in my marriage and arguments and fights that we didn't even have to have. But I just think that neither one of us kind of knew how to navigate that and how to work through that. And so that is why I always try to tell people, I try to help them with the learning curve. I'm like, listen, I've done this, I did this, I nagged, doesn't work. Don't try any of this stuff. Do something different. So I tried to help them by giving them tools to do the opposite of what I did, hoping that they will eliminate years of frustration and anger and all that other kind of stuff. So yeah, I've learned a lot.
Love that. And so, why do you think it is that we have like there's people so often enter into like a marriage or a relationship and they're not prepared? Why do you think we're
Yeah.
not really getting prepared prior to entering into one?
I think that's how society has it. Like you're taught, okay, women, you're supposed to cook, do this, whatever, go to work or whatever. We learn things in college, we learn things at church, we learn things all over the place, but no one ever teaches you about relationships. And I think it's important because sometimes the people who have modeled relationships for us may not have been the best people. Like for instance, I grew up in a single parent home. My dad left when I was like 10 years old. So it's pretty much just my mom. So she taught me how to be strong, independent, go after what you want, don't let anybody walk over you or anything like that, which are all good qualities. And I get why she taught me these things. But she did not prepare me for marriage because when we got in an argument, I was like, "You're not walking all over me. You're not ruling me and stuff." So there was no talk about compromise. There was no talk about relationship stuff. It was just like all you. And I feel that that's just how it is. Unfortunately, a lot of us grow up in single parent homes and we're taught different things based on our parents' experiences because that's what they need to do to survive. So they think they're trying to help and prepare us, but in essence, it's kind of like putting us back because they're not preparing us for real life. And that's why I think premarital counseling is very important. And it's something that should be done. And I also think that if you get engaged, don't pick your wedding date at first. Go through counseling, then pick a date because you're not ready. And if you pick a date first, you're going to be trying to run and rush your counseling so you can hurry up and get married. So I think that the day there's a proposal, the day you should see a marriage counselor, so you guys get premarital counseling to avoid a lot of stuff. It's easy to like be proactive instead of reactive.
That is so good. Like the point that you just said about don't just rush to pick a date. You are talking to somebody who has been married and divorced. And I can let you know that right when we got married, it was initially what date everyone asked you, when are you getting married? Like, let's
Yes.
pick out the wedding dresses. What color? And everyone's so, you become so focused on the event that, like you said, it was like, okay, marriage counseling was just like, yeah, we need to do it. But it was on the back burner because we have to plan a wedding. And
Right,
and
right.
I do think that is how society is as well. Society
It
is
is.
very like, let's have the biggest wedding, the prettiest, spend the most amount of money, but the focus is on the wedding, in which it's like that's one day. Like we have
Yes.
one day of this beautiful bliss, but the next morning I have to wake up and I am now tied to you for what should be the rest of our lives. But if we are not properly prepared, and I think that
Mhm.
is such a good point to make, because I do wish that there were more people speaking on the fact that you do need to really think about what you're doing and be okay to, get engaged and then say, you know what, this is not going to work.
Yes, because it's some people when they get engaged, it's almost like you're locked in. It's almost like there's no way to get out. And so sometimes I do feel like I know some people who just went through with it, even though it was not a good fit. They knew they shouldn't get married, but because they said they were engaged and they accepted the proposal, they felt locked in, so they just went ahead and did it. And then later on, they end up getting a divorce. But the whole thing is like, if only sometimes it's like hindsight is 2020. But it's like if she was able to, if we all are able to like look at things and be realistic and think about things before we do them, I think the chances of us sometimes making better decisions with who we marry is a lot better. And I also think that we will put more intent and more effort into preparing for marriage. Not just like you said, not the venue, not the day, not the dress, but like to make it long lasting. Because I'm just gonna be honest, my husband and I, we started premarital counseling. We got maybe one or two, sessions in, and then we just let it go, and we got married. So that's just what happened because we were rushing for the day. We planned. I think I got proposed to on my birthday, which is February. We were married in June. So it's like a quick wedding. So you don't have time for premarital counseling. You only have 4 months. Like seriously. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And so, how much of that do you think is also based on like social media and people feeling like they have to look and come off a certain way? Because I know when people get engaged and they have these
Mhm.
elaborate proposals and they get 50,000 likes, and it's like, oh my gosh, he flew a plane over the building and then he filmed it, a movie. And like, so much of it is almost having to live up to what other people think your
Mhm.
relationship should be. And so, what can you speak on just a little bit about maybe even um, ways that we can make sure we are fulfilling the relationship that God wants us to have with the person compared to just fulfilling what other people think we should have?
Exactly. Because I know that at the time I got married or I got my proposal, I was 26. Oh yeah, 26. So, by the time you're 26, people are like, when are you getting married? You're almost 30. And, it's just a lot of pressure. And I think it's unfair because, to be honest, I just think that we have all been sold a lie. We've been told if you're not married by a certain time, it's never going to happen. You'll be an old maid. You can't have kids, this, that, and the other. But that's not true. Like, people, there's technology. If someone in her 50s and 60s can have a baby, you can too. So it's like there's no need for the rush. Now, maybe before you had to rush before your eggs dried up, but it's like we don't have to do that anymore, We have technology. As long as you have a uterus, you can have a baby as old as you want to have one. So I don't think that should be a factor for rushing things and trying to hurry up and get married. And I think it's very important that in addition to waiting just to make sure we know who we are and know what we want out of life, that we should wait and ask God what He wants us to do. Because I think that sometimes we don't ask Him. So God, I don't believe God is a pushy God. He's not going to force us to do anything. So if you don't ask Him, He might try to tell you, but if you're not listening, He's not going to be like, no, you're not doing it, because He doesn't force us. We have free will. So he'll just let you go, do what you're gonna do. He'll be like, I got you when this thing falls apart. I'm here for you. And then, things end up messed up. And they were like, God, why'd you let this happen? And he's like, And God's probably thinking, I tried to tell you not to do this, but you just didn't listen. And I think that sometimes we're so caught up in the moment that we're not thinking about our future or anything else. That's what I think it is.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes too, we don't ask God because we're
Nope.
afraid of what the answer is going to be.
Sometimes
Like
we
I feel
already
like,
know.
yeah, I don't want to ask you if I should get married to this person because what if you say no and then now I got
Mhm.
to cancel all this stuff that I have planned or like, so sometimes it's like we don't want to ask God, but at the same time is when we're in it and we're struggling, the first person we call out to is like, God, please help me. This person is
Exactly.
crazy. Like, how did this happen? And so, but God being the good father that he is, he kind of lets you touch the
Yes.
stove and and says like, oh, don't, but if you do, I'll put a band-aid on it. But I think that's so important that there are so many lessons that people can learn beforehand. And so I
Yes.
love that you mentioned premarital counseling. I love all of that. But even too, can you talk about how almost like what the misconception of marriage is per se. Like I feel like even if you do have the proper things to get into a marriage, people are like, marriage isn't supposed to be like this. Like it's supposed to be butterflies and rainbows. So for you having been married and having experience being married, can you just talk about some of the misconceptions and then how they can be addressed so that you don't find yourself disappointed after you're married? If you are just now tuning in to this episode of Unmute Your Mic, my name is Jessica Bell. I'm your host from Kansas City, Missouri, and today I'm talking to Keana from Alabama, and we are talking about the misconceptions of marriage. So please continue to tune in and listen.
I think the most important thing to do is lower your expectations. Now, I'm not talking about go marry a bum or somebody who just refused to work, anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is lower your expectations. Don't assume that the person that you marry is going to be perfect because you're going to put them on a pedestal and they're going to fall because no one can measure up to the pedestal that you have in your mind. Like that person doesn't exist. It may be what you think about that person, but once you get to know them, they're not like that. They're a real person. They're a human. They're gonna make mistakes. They're not gonna do the right thing. You're gonna get mad at them. It happens because we're human and this is life. But if you go into it thinking, oh, we're gonna have the perfect marriage and we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that and life's gonna be great. Because I know I had my life planned out, what we were gonna do, all that stuff. And it's like when you go into it with what you expect, it may not happen. I mean, it could. I don't want to like mess up people's dreams. I'm just saying it may not happen. So when you go in, your expectations are okay. The only thing I expect from this person is for them to be who they are. I expect them to be faithful. I think that's a good expectation to have. I expect them to be honest with me, be transparent. I expect for us to work on money together if that's something you want to do, or I expect to know what's happening with our money. I expect us to, have some kind of way to do our finances. And to be honest, I think that even sometimes with your expectation for them to go to church every single week, if that's not what they're doing before they marry you, then lower that expectation because it's probably not going to happen once they do marry you. Even if they do it while you're dating, it may not last after you say I do because a lot of things change things because y'all have each other now. So there's no need to keep up that front. So just lower those expectations and expect them to be human, expect them to make mistakes. Because if you expect them to be human, then a lot of things they do, you won't be so hurt by it. Now, I'm not saying like things like murder people, like major stuff. I'm just talking about like arguments or maybe, well, I can't believe they didn't understand how I'm feeling. Like they may not be able to because they're human. And if you don't communicate it effectively, they're not going to know. And sometimes we're not the best communicators that we think we are. So I just think we should lower the expectations, expect them to be human, expect to have some issues, and then you can know how to handle these issues when they come up instead of reeling from the shock of, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Nope. You have gotten past that because your expectations are expected them to be real and human, and you can work on the issue at hand.
That's so good. That's so good because I feel like you said, you have to, and it's like not lower your standards, right? But lower
That's
your
it. Yes.
expectations. So it's like you're not like, oh well, if he cheats on you, he cheats on you. If he hits you, he hits you. Like not that kind of thing.
No.
But like you said, people. I remember somebody telling me once that you have to marry with the expectation of, if that person never changed, if they stayed exactly how they are, would you be okay with that? Because
Right.
sometimes people also marry for potential, right? So they're like,
Hmm.
one day you're going to be amazing and we'll be fine. And it's not that you can't have an expectation that, like, hey, we're going to constantly grow and improve and evolve, and maybe we'll make more money or we'll get better jobs or that kind of
Right.
thing. But like, if the core of the person never changes, are you okay with that? And I think that's a
Right.
question a lot of people don't want to ask, because a lot of times we do sometimes see what the person could be, and sometimes even in faith, we're like,
Hmm.
I'm believing that this will change or that will change. But what if it doesn't? And then you're stuck
Exactly.
constantly trying to change the person.
And
And
that
I
can
think
mess
that
everything
can
up.
be really dangerous. Have you experienced that, even like being married? Did you experience that time, maybe times where you're like, you wanted to change them, but you had to just kind of realize, like, hey, this might just be who they are?
Well, we have all had that experience. Like my husband had the experience with me because he wanted to change like the way I did things. I'm just gonna be honest. I'm like a very stubborn person. Once my mind is set, there's no turning away from it. I don't care what happened. Kiana's gonna stay with what she originally thought or said. And I may not apologize. Sometimes I can come off as rude and offensive. I don't mean to. It's just like I get to a point, I just say what I'm thinking. So he had some issues with that and wanted to change that. I had some issues, wanted him to change. 'Cause I wanted him to go to church every week. I wanted him to do all the stuff that I thought he should do. As a Christian, this is what we're supposed to do, and this is what it's supposed to look like. And then one day, maybe, I don't know, 10, 12 years in, we kind of realized that all this nagging and trying to change each other was not working. We're still the same people we were when we got married. So he decided on his own, let me just stop trying to change Kiana. And, maybe if she cleans once or twice a week, it's fine. And I was like, well, maybe I need to stop just trying to change my husband. If he doesn't go to church every week, it's fine. That's between him and God. And if he has a relationship with God, then whether he goes to church or not should not even matter. I'm like, why am I letting this be something that's distracting us from a bigger picture of working together and growing together and, just becoming better communicators and working together in our marriage instead of worrying about all these other things. So I think that trying to change each other, I'm just going to tell you, that's what you guys are trying to do. It does not work. It will not work ever. So you have to work on yourself. The only person you can change is you. And in our marriage, what we both decided to do is work on ourselves because he couldn't change me, I couldn't change him. But I can change Kiana. I can change how I react to things. I can change what I say. I have a better attitude. I can change what I do and do not say to people. I can change me and I can make changes for the better. And he can change himself. He can make changes for the better. So if you're both working on yourself, then you're going to get the best version of each other. But you can't change him and he can't change you. That just does not work.
Yeah, I love that. And that's true, because I truly do believe that if somebody wants to change, like, they have to want it for themselves. When we try to change, and
Hmm.
it's just like in any, not even just in relationships, just in general, if you try to change to fit in with a certain group of people, or to be popular, or to whatever the thing is, it never really sticks, because you didn't really truly want to do it for yourself. You just tried to do it for
Exactly.
somebody else. And
And
so,
that's true. It never works.
yeah, it doesn't work, and then you kind of find yourself in that position where you're trying to figure out, wait, who am I now? Like, who am I? Because you're just trying to become for each environment that you're in. And so, can I ask you, what role has prayer and your relationship with God played in your marriage and in your relationships in general?
It's played a huge role, and I'm going to say huge because there's a time in our marriage where we thought we were going to break up, things were not good. I prayed about it, I talked to God about it, and God worked that situation out. There were times when something I had been arguing and we had been fighting about for a long time, like years, and nothing changed. Nothing was different. I prayed about it, and within a few months, things turned around. I noticed that sometimes it's best not to even bring your troubles to your partner. Like, they can't do anything about it. They can't change themselves. If they could, I'm probably sure they would. I mean, they may try, but unless there's like a real behavioral change, they're going to go back to the way that they are. So if you want real change, lasting change, I think the best thing to do is go to God because He's the source of everything. He knows that person. He can tell you what the problem is before the problem even happens. He can show you how to deal with things. He can guide you through things. And so that's how prayer has been tremendous in helping me. So now sometimes I do say stuff, but here's an example. It was last year, I think it's like in May, April, or May or June, one of those months. My husband and I, we had like this little thing we were like not arguing about because we've gotten past that. When you've been married for so long, just like, okay, what's the point? But it was a conversation that we would have that we were not having any success in resolving the situation. And so I was in a car one day, I was coming back from the gym and I was like fuming about it. I was like, God, we got to address this again. And I don't know what to say. And I'm tired of talking about it. And then I happened to be listening to this song on the radio. Well, on YouTube because I listened to my phone with Bluetooth in the car. And I was talking to God about it. It was my Bluetooth was on, I was listening to music. And there was this song called Hands in It. And I think it's by Evan and Eris. And I think Mike Todd was like the featured person in the song. And I was listening to it. I had heard that song many times because I love music. It's weird because I write love songs, but I am like such a huge fan of gospel music. It's just crazy. So I've heard it before and I was listening to it. But on this particular day, he said something that really stuck out to me. He was like, sometimes you don't even need to talk to your spouse. You need to go to the source. Don't talk to them about it because they are not the source. And I was like, God, really? I can't say anything? And God was like, no, you cannot say anything. Of course, I was glad I listened to him, but it was difficult because I had to keep my mouth shut, which is difficult for me to do because I'm a talker. But God was like, no, this is not the time to say anything. Let me deal with this. You go ahead and do it, whatever it is you're going to be doing. And so I kept my mouth shut, and God worked that situation out without me having to say anything. But if I had not listened to him and not prayed about it, we probably would have the same situation in 2021 because I would have run my mouth about it. We would have gotten to the same discussion, come to the same non-conclusion. But when I prayed about it, then it helped out. And I noticed sometimes like God will help me, like I'm on the verge of saying something. It's almost like I just can't say it. I'm just like, oh, I guess I wasn't meant to say that. So yeah, it helps a lot.
Yeah, and that's so good because it really is about us having that relationship with God, walking closely enough with Him so that when He
Mhm.
does say, like, be quiet or I got this, that we actually have enough reverence to be like, let me not say anything. Because we also know that when God deals with it, He does it in a way that we could never do. And so
Exactly.
for I've had to learn many times. I'm like, God, I would please deal with this situation because I know if I do it, I'm probably gonna mess it up. I have to go back, apologize, try to figure out what I did wrong. And it just saves so much time to know that, like, when you ultimately know that God has your best interests at heart, it makes it a lot easier to sit back and allow situations to happen and let him move on your behalf.
Mhm.
So I love that you said that. And then just wrapping up, is there anything, any advice that you could give to somebody who's listening today who is maybe struggling in a relationship? They're having issues with a relationship, maybe if it's not even just marriage, but relationships in general. What are just some words of encouragement that you could give them?
I would personally just encourage them to let go and stop doing what they're trying to do because it may not be working. So I think that some self-assessment needs to happen. You need to take a step back, do some self-assessment, and then maybe try a different approach. I would even advise someone to maybe even seek the help of a counselor. Now, you would seek the help of a counselor, not so much for the other person, but you can seek the help of a counselor for yourself. Because if you don't understand what you could or may not be doing that is making the problem worse or instigating the situation, you can't change it. And there's nothing you can do or say that will change. But if you talk to a counselor and you start to get to know yourself, what triggers you, what makes you upset, how maybe the way you speak to people may not come across as kindly as you think it is, then you can work on you. And then once you're working on you and you're starting to understand these different things about yourself, then you can try a different approach with that person that you're dealing with. And they can help you. Even if you are in like a situation where it's very hurtful, you need to heal before you can even try to address what is going on. So I would just say seek a counselor. Don't wait until you're like on your last leg and you're ready to just give up everything, seek a counselor now before there's really a major problem. Because if you don't see one, things are going to get worse. So do it now to avoid yourself some problems and then get to know yourself and then address the situation. That's the advice I would give.
I love that. And like you said, it is so important that we get to know ourselves, that we know the things that we need to change and we need to work on so that we can become better for us. Because I believe once we are better and we are the best version of ourselves, then it's way easier to enter into any type of relationship. So I just
It
thank you so
is.
much, Keana, for being on my show today. You gave us so much wisdom, and we could have a very long conversation about this. So I really just appreciate you being able to share, being transparent about things in your marriage. And I just want to thank you again for being on Unmute Your Mic.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed being a guest and I just loved being here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to another episode of Unmute Your Mic. I'm going to put Keana's social media information below so that you can contact her, email her, ask her any more questions about just her story or what we talked about today. I want to thank you all for tuning in to another episode. As always, you can find us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. So you can reach us many different ways. And please make sure you subscribe, share, and continue to be bold, be brave, and unmute your mic. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Unmute Your Mic. Be sure to tune in next time when Jessica takes her mic off mute as she continues her journey to find stories that inspire and uplift our communities.